Imagine not being Leeds, not feeling this pain, not dancing through thunder, not walking through rain. Imagine not rising with fists in the air when the world turned its back and no one would care. We've lived in the ashes, we've drowned in defeat, but still we stand proud on our battered old feet. Imagine not loving with all that you are. Imagine not being Leeds.
We love you, Leeds, Leeds, Leeds.
We do love you, Leeds. Now then, folks, I'm back again. I really enjoy these little videos in my car while I'm at work, finishing work, before I start work. Yes, and another little story I've seen today. Gustavo Prado, Brazilian Wonderkid. I've had a few notifications today. Had a bit of a read up about him. As the thumbnail says, are Leeds looking at the next Raphinha? Might seem a little bit bold. And where do we get that from? 17 million quid's the rumoured price that it could potentially come at Leeds for. We signed Raphinha for 17 million quid. As a bit of an unknown quantity too. Difference being he'd already made his way to Europe at Raphinha from the Brazilian league. He made himself way to Portugal and then on to France, which some people say Farmers League, not the best division in the world. Arguably still more going on in the French league than there is in the Brazilian league. So this is one of those moves where Prado is a raw talent. He's still only 20. The difference is when we got Raphinha, I think he was 24. We'd be taking the gamble on bringing this young lad over to European football and to the highest level of European football too. It's one of them decisions to make as a football club. You know, do you pull the trigger early? Do you take that gamble and spend, don't get me wrong, 17 million quid's a lot of money still. But do you potentially take that risk for the level of risk to reward? As in, if it works out, he could be the next level, the next step for him could be a Raphinha move. You know, if it comes and he does that well, where the next club, if he decides to move on, which you always hope a good player doesn't, but if that happens, they've got the potential for you to be that selling club who gets that 35, 40, 50 million pound transfer fee for the player that you've taken a relatively low gamble on. If you can get him for the cheapest price. It's a bit of a funny one, this, because there's actually a release clause in there. Apparently, rumoured there's a release clause for about 52 million quid. But apparently doing a bit of reading up about it, in Brazil, they tend to put a lot of their Wonderkids and starlets on those sort of contracts. But Internacional, which is a side he plays for in the top flight in the Brazilian league, would be willing, by all accounts, to do a cut price deal for about 17 million quid. For me, 70 million quid sounds a lot of money. Do you take the risk on a player in January? I would say not. I think this may be one we look at the end of the season, if he's still available, of course. There's a lot of eyes on him at the minute, a lot of teams looking at him, Atlanta looking at him, Stuttgart and Nottingham Forest have sort of thrown their hat into the ring, so to speak. So there's a lot of admirers at decent clubs, and it isn't a lot of money when you're talking about, you know, the potential he has. When you're talking about football in general, the money in general in football, 70 million quid isn't loads. But when you look at his stats, he's played about 80 games in his career. I think he's got 3 goals, 3 assists. But he is a raw talent, and a lot of those minutes have come off the bench. A lot of those minutes have come early in his development. You know, we look at players, don't we, in England and say, you know, 18, 19, 20 years of age, it's too young to throw him in there. And I understand that. At certain clubs, this lad's been playing, you know, a few years now, and maybe his stats probably show that he's maybe not been at it since making his debut. I think he was 18 when he made his debut. He's played a lot of games, but the minutes haven't equated to 80 games or such, so his stats don't look great. But in terms of his individual stats, without me pulling him on screen, you know, a lot of his, you know, one-on-ones are in the top percentiles of that division, and outside the top divisions in Europe, you know, beneath that, the other divisions outside those top 5 is in the top percentiles for a lot of, you know, one-on-one take on. Defensively, he's pretty good too. He wins a lot of duels. His shots, his pass completion, he rates really highly in a lot of stats, key stats that would show, for me, the trajectory is he'd be a really good player. And his stats that people only care about, the G&A stats, the G&A merchants, I think all the underlying stats back up that he will eventually, as he grows in age and in maturity and just naturally gets better as years go on, I think the underlying data shows he will become, you know, a player that has the output that you want from a top player. And let's be fair, if you've got the intention to spend 17 million quid on a lad that's only played in Brazil, that's only 20 years of age, who doesn't look G&A wise an absolute animal, then you need him to give you something, you know, going forward. You need him to, whether it's straight away or the year after, if you're going to get into a contract, you need it to, I think as a newly promoted side at Leeds United, it needs to work, because that is a lot of money for us. I am happy with the wingers at the club. We know we won light. That's why, you know, this story makes sense to a degree. And like I said, the fee isn't huge, but for January, for now, does he keep us in the division? You know, if needed, he isn't the difference maker in terms of that. But I think potential-wise, he has the potential to be better than everyone we've got at the club currently. Potential-wise, when you look at, you know, you look at a bit of footage of him, you read the data, you read some articles about him, what they over in Brazil think about the lad, and he's highly, highly thought of. And it's the rawness I quite like when you get, you know, when you look at a youngster, which he is at 20 years of age, who hasn't played in Europe. You look at someone with, you know, potential and that raw sort of like aggression and talent when he's got the ball at his feet, who just wants to beat a man, who just wants to play football in the right way and just attack his fullback. And I really like that about him. He looks really, really raw. He looks powerful. Like I say, I think the goals and assists will come with this lad. And I think it's just about who will, because for me, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when this happens. Who in Europe takes a gamble on this lad? You know, we weren't the team to bring Raphinha to Europe. We weren't, but we were the team to put Raphinha on the top stage for me. He propelled his career. Bearing in mind he already played Champions League football before he come to Leeds United, but the Premier League, it's the playground you want to play in, innit? Because that propels you to the next level if done right, and puts the eyes of the world on you. And Raphinha didn't get a Brazil cap until he's been at Leeds United, regardless of European football he played in France. And maybe this is a pathway for Prado. Maybe he comes to Leeds. He's an under-20s international for Brazil. He's going to be playing in Chile in the World Cup for the under-20s too. So you look at that and you can see the pedigree there. I mean, to play in Brazil, it is a decent level. You know, technical ability in Brazil's massive, as we know. You know, a lot of the flair players and the expensive world-class players we've seen in my lifetime have come from Brazil. You know, the Ronaldinhos, R9, Neymar's, etc., Vinny Jr. Now, there's been so many great players come out of Brazil. Obviously Raphinha, is close to our hearts, and we watch his career with envy that it's not a Leeds United, but with pride as well. And maybe this Prado could be one of these players. We looked at Pajau. You know, Brazil always pricks my ears. Brazilian footballers, I love them. We missed out on Pajau. It looks like it's not going too well for Pajau out in France at Marseille. He's not had the start of the season they all hoped, which is a shame for him, but I'm not so arsed, I won't lie. But 17 million quid for a player who's got a £52 million release clause in his contract, apparently. That's, for me, the potential he's got, that's a bit of a snip. I would love Leeds to do this more often. We've branched out into that South American market now. What a lot of teams do. Brighton are really good at it. Bringing people over like this sort of player. Take the gamble, pay that 15, 20, 25 million pound player on a player, which is a gamble, yeah. But if that comes right, if you get it right, and they don't stay at your club for 3-4 years, you're getting a hefty sell on clause. The value there, are you? Massive. So we see a lot of sides do it in Premier League, and I think that's a blueprint Leeds need to use, and Leeds, I think, will use going forward based on this information. You know, that we are now looking outside Europe as far as South America, and I hope we link to a few more players like Prado, because he's an exciting one. Don't want to harp on too much, but we've seen in previous seasons, when the old regime, when we were looking in the right waters, we were linked with Guardiola, who ended up at City, so we do know how to identify a player. We've seen this summer, we got some really good players over the line, we got some, fall short. Can we convince a young lad with talent in Brazil to come over to Leeds and fight for his place and break into that first team? I'd love it if we did. It'd get us all excited, I'm sure. we're doing well as it is, and I think we'll be fine. But yeah, I got really excited when I seen this link. Like I say, you do your digging, and he looks a talent. Don't just look at the GNA of the kid. You know, if you want to have a bit of a dig, have a look at the underlying stats underneath those GNA, and he's a massive talent. And yeah, 17 million quid could be enough to get him through the door. And the last time we signed a Brazilian for 17 million quid, it was Raphinha. So watch this space, and we'll see what happens. Yeah. Take care. Please like, please subscribe, and all that jargon as usual. Love yous to bits. Take care. Bye bye.